Hey everyone, Sebastian here, back again with another question from Bluebook Test 1, Reading and Writing, Module 1, this time question 7, also a good number, right? But it is another central ideas and details question. This time the passage is shorter, sometimes the passages are shorter. Typically people think that'll make it easier, and sometimes it does, but not necessarily, right? So let's get into this one and talk about the strategy. The following text is adapted from Charles W. Chestnut's novel, The Marrow of Tradition. Mrs. Ochiltree was a woman of strong individuality, whose comments upon her acquaintance, present or absent, were marked by a frankness, at times no less than startling. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided. Mrs. Ochiltree was aware of this sentiment on the part of her acquaintance and rather exulted in it. Based on the text, what is true about Mrs. Ochiltree's acquaintances? Okay, so we want to focus on the acquaintances, which is mentioned here. And there's some sentiment, right? So then Mrs. Ochiltree was a woman of strong individuality whose comments upon her acquaintances, present or absent, were marked by a frankness, at times no less than startling. So she's making statements about people that are very honest and frank and like startle people, okay? So this characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided, so people were avoiding her because of that. And then she was aware of this and exulted in it, so she like enjoyed this. So let's look at the choices. They try to refrain from discussing topics that would upset Mrs. Ochiltree. That doesn't feel right, but they are unable to spend as much time with Mrs. Ochiltree as she would like. They are too preoccupied with their own concerns to speak with Mrs. Ochiltree. They are likely offended by what Mrs. Ochiltree has said about them. They are, okay, so I think we can eliminate B, right? Because she's not unhappy that they're not spending time with her, right? She exults in the fact that they avoid her. There's nothing about the topics that they're trying to avoid or not, so we're going to eliminate A. And then it doesn't mention anything about their own concerns, but it does mention how her frankness can be startling and that this caused them to avoid. So if they're being startled and then avoiding a person, that could be that they're offended by what she's saying. So I would go with D here, right? So it's going to be D. All right, so this one again, normally what I do is I read the passage, I read the question, then I read the answer choices. This time I read the passage, read the question, then I sort of went back to the passage because there was a specific word, acquaintances, right? And I was like, oh, I just read about acquaintances. And then while I was there, I was like, well, might as well go back and see exactly what's going on with them. And then I looked at the answer choices. You could have done it the other way. You could have looked at the answer choices and then went back. That totally works. That's usually what I do. And sometimes people read the question and the answer choices before they even look at the passage. I'll do that sometimes too. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. It's sort of a feeling, and it's sort of, if you approach any of them with the right process for their own type, then you should be fine, right? It's not so rigid. There's a little flexibility. You have a little bit of choice here. So I hope this question helped you, and I hope you're all enjoying your day, and that if your acquaintances are avoiding you, that you're also exulting in them. Talk to you soon. Bye.